I guess it is 9:15. Time for us to get started. Glad to see everybody out this morning.
We gather here.
Jay gave us some critique of the lesson last week. He did a good job, but I think he talked too fast.
His love is burning in our hearts like living flame.
Let me know.
For through the loving Son, the Father makes us one.
But you're spread from yay yonder to yay yonder, and I'm sitting there trying to look at people's faces and go, I see a change in that face. You got a question, you got something to say. But if you have a comment for me, please stop me, put your hand up, say whatever you need to say. We'll carry on the discussion. We'll try to get through this lesson with a lot of ground to cover. Before we get started, go with me to our Father's prayer as we open the class. Almighty God, Father in heaven, we're so thankful for each and every day that you bless us with. Such a beautiful day, shows your majesty, your creation. Thankful, Father, that you sent your Son to give us hope, that we will have a hope in heaven and eternity with you. And Father, we ask that you be with us this morning as we continue this study of gossip and the sins of the tongue. Praying, Father, that you would help us direct our hearts and minds as we go out every day and meet people and greet people, and even here within our own congregation, of how we communicate with one another and how we care for one another. Be with us this morning as we get in this study and maybe gain the most from it and apply it to ourselves every day. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen. So we started out last week talking about gossip. What was gossip? Anybody remember what that definition of gossip was? Anybody? We talked about, think about gossip as being that thing. It can be essentially a lot of things. Defaming of somebody. Something said against somebody that's, could be an outright lie. Could be truth. Could be a half-truth. But in the end, it's something that shouldn't have ever been said, should have never been started, should have never been talked about. Well, this week we're going to talk about the when and the why of gossip. If that slide comes up there, you'll see what we're going with. There it is. All right. A couple of quotes to start out this morning. A rumor without a leg to stand on will get around another way. Kind of interesting, huh? To think about. You got a rumor out there, there's no truth in the matter. Really didn't, account for much. But it's going to get around some way if it finds another way. And it's pretty neat at work. I've been in management for the last couple of years. And something can be said in closed doors. And before the end of the day, it's got out somewhere. How it gets somewhere, when it's between two people and me and the other guy, the only ones that knows, somewhere in there, it got to somebody else in some kind of whisper or whatever. It doesn't matter. And we're going to talk about whispering through. It's just something. I might have never said anything. And my manager might have said anything. But he might have got it to another manager somewhere that told it to somebody else, and then it got to somewhere. Everybody asked, one of the most recent big rumor came about it, says, are you going to be our educator now? I'm like, we just talked about that today. I haven't said anything to anybody, didn't plan on saying anything to anybody, but it got around pretty quick. Miss Barrett's got her eyes fixed right this way. With the other one, by this same guy, if it'll move. There it goes. Never tell evil of a man if you do not know it for certainty. And if you know it for certainty, then ask yourself, why should I tell it? It's interesting, this guy that quoted both of these. He's one of these guys back from the, I think, late 1700s, 1800s, philosopher or some sort. But he come up with this idea called physiognomy. And the whole study of it was, and he wrote books on it, was that you could tell the character by the look of a man, just by their facial features. Can you imagine if we did that here? If you just looked at somebody's face, oh, you're a scheming kind of character, aren't you? And what kind of things that would spread amongst people. It didn't fare very well in the end after a while, if that book got around, that a lot of people, shot it down. But that's what he did. He looked at people's facial structure and wrote a book about it, a study about it, that said that you could tell the character of a man just by the way he looked. We're talking about if we fail, a lot of times we think failing in the golden rule. It said, so whatever you wish others would do to you, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets. How often, or have you, in some times past, I think about it, somebody maybe said something about you and how that made you feel. That somebody spread a rumor around about me. But then you turn around and do exactly the same thing. You get up some kind of, like we said last week, and we're gonna use this little phrase a lot of times, a little dainty morsel of something, and you've got a little bit of information, and you talk about it. But when it turns around on you, it's, why did they talk about me that way? Well, they shouldn't have talked about you anyway. Should have maybe come to you, discussed whatever it was they found out about you. We talk about that as we go on. We're going to talk about several motivations this morning. Some we'll spend a little more time on than others. But these are the main motivations that Nathan Peeler in this book describes out. Jealousy, holding a grudge against someone where you simply just don't like them. Confusion, curiosity. That desire, as we spoke of last week, to be in the know, to be that person in that circle of information. And then he ends with a false sense of connection and bonding. So let's start with jealousy. Turn over to 2 Corinthians, if you will. We're just going to look at these right here real quick. Paul's fears. And this is only one example of this, but 2 Corinthians 12 and 20. All right, here we are. It said, for I fear that perhaps when I come, I may find you not as I wish, and that you may find me not as you wish, that perhaps there may be quarreling, jealousy, anger, hostility, slander, gossip, conceit, and disorder. They wonder why, in that end, that's what he said after he feared he would find in that way. If you look back in 2 Corinthians, the same opening here at chapter 10 and 10 through 12, talking about, get here. For they say, his letters are weighty and strong, for his bodily presence is weak, and his speech of no account. For they say, they're spreading out things already about rumors about him, for they say. Not that he is, not that these things are true, for they say. And it said, let such person understand that what we say by letter when absent, we do when present. I'm going to be the same person when I'm gone from here as the same person as I am when I'm here. But they were jealousy of him and said, not that we dare classify or compare ourselves with some of those who are commending themselves. But when they measure themselves by one another and compare themselves to one another, they are without understanding. They were jealous of him. For what reason, I had no idea. Other than the fact that maybe he got a lot of notoriety. Maybe people paid attention to him. And the people that wanted, his status, want to knock him down a notch or two. We talked about that last week too. Most time when you gossip about somebody or have anything bad to say about somebody, it's because you want to bring them down to, not necessarily your bad level, but you just want to bring them down to your level again. You can't stand that person who maybe you want to consider your equal to be any higher standing than you are. We talked about last week James 3, 1 through 12, and the sins of the tongue. If you don't turn over there again, we're going to start at 13 and go through verses 13 through 18. So James 3, we talked about 1 through 12. But it said, who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct, let him show his works in meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exists, there will be no disorder in every vile practice. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. Now 4, 1 through 3. For what causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? Is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? You desire and do not have, so you murder. You covet and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have, because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive, because you ask wrongly, to spend it on your passions. So, it said jealousy. I like this part about covetousness. You think about jealousy here. You ever been jealous of someone here? Or ask a question of yourself? Man, look at that new truck he just broke up with. Can he really afford that? You're laughing, Cotty, but has that ever rose in your mind when you drive up in the parking lot, somebody comes up in a brand new car, and the first thing you think is, well, they must be doing pretty good for themselves. But that's the questions we ask ourselves. Jealousy, covetousness, Look at that nice new home they just got. That's way too much for them. They're just using the blessings that God has given them. How many years have they been working to get to that point that maybe, they are enjoying the blessings that God has given them, that they've obtained over time? And here they are. They bought a nice new home. We should be celebrating with them and, rejoicing in the fact that they have it. Those are the things. They breed discord. They make us talk about ourselves, and talk about others. And you find somebody that, you want to find somebody that agrees with you. Yeah, they really can't afford that home. They really can't afford that truck. They really can't afford whatever it is. It doesn't really matter. You're going to find something, say something about jealousy. An untamed tongue and a jealous heart are a deadly combination. And that's a quote from this book. You put them both together, you want to be jealous about somebody, and you can't control what you say, they're both a deadly combination. Holding a grudge. There are plenty scriptures you can read throughout the Bible, that motivates us to serve God. But We do. We can't help ourselves. Somebody wrongs us in some way. We can't let it go. I tried not to wear a lot of the stuff that I talked with people and people came at me in anger or whatever like that. Being a manager, I tried not to wear it right out here on my sleeve. And not that I hold a grudge with anybody. But the new manager coming in, like I said, I'm transitioning off of that back into the educator role in my job. And the new manager comes in, and she used this phrase with me. Does anybody come with a warning label? So think about that in your how you react with people and your experiences with people, your relations with people. And you've got a grudge against this person. And somebody new comes along and you want to give out the warning label about this person. You better watch. They'll talk about you. What are you doing? You give them some kind of information. They come with a warning label. This person gets mad. This person is, always in your business. This person. It's got something. They come with a warning label. We have to get around that. We can't just go to just because we are angry with that one person that we're going to shuck off that anger that we have onto somebody else and use that, to justify our meaning for that. This is why I talk about it. This is why I'm the way I am. This is why the way they are. We just want to talk about that person. See, if you can't say anything good, we've heard that a lot, right? If you can't say anything good, don't say anything good at all, or don't say anything at all. But the other part of it is, don't give mixed messages. Yeah, they're a great person. They do this, they do that, but, and you mix in that little bit of stuff that you have on your heart all the time about them that you don't particularly like about them, and shuck that in there, just kind of slide that under the door too. Give them a little bit of this. They're a great person, but, and slide that in. It just leads to something more to talk about because they're going to want to ask more questions about what's that you don't like. What is it that they did to you? You've got more stories to tell. We simply dislike them. So this is a question. I want some answers. Is it okay to dislike someone? I got a sure. Anybody else? Is it okay to dislike someone? I got a bunch of heads sitting there stock still. Nobody wants to go yes, no, maybe.
I would say so, but I think we need to keep it our dislike in the context of speaking of being angry and sitting on, for instance.
Yeah.
Like that. And we need to keep it under control. We don't need to let it sleep us. Same thing like holding a grudge.
Sure.
We talk about forgiveness sometimes. You can't always forget, but you shouldn't let it rule your life either.
No.
There comes a point where you kind of have to transition.
Did Jesus dislike some people? I didn't say he didn't love them. Did he dislike some actions of some people, which in a sense made him dislike them in the moment? Could he have liked them later on? The Pharisees gave him down the road all the time. I would, assume by that fact that the things he said with them, he didn't come in and take the table of the money changers and sit there. And when they say he fashioned a whip, you know how long it takes to make a whip? I don't know how big this thing was. I'm thinking about a whip. I'm thinking something that would do some damage, something that would sting. And he fashioned it, which meant he sat there and he wove together for my part, sat there and wove together some leather strips or whatever he had in front of him. He fashioned a whip and then went in there and used it. He disliked the people sitting in front of him, what they were doing. But he didn't sin in that. If you look at Ephesians, and this is referring back to what we just talked about, holding a grudge and then disliking somebody too. Oh, what was my reference there? Ephesians 4. Ephesians 4:25 and through the 32. It says, therefore, having put away falsehood, let each of you speak the truth with his neighbor. We are members of one another. Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger and give no opportunity to the devil. Let the thief no longer steal, but rather let him labor, doing honest work with his own hands, so that he may have something to share with everyone in need. Let no corrupt talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for the building up, as it fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. And do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, but by whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ forgave you. So I'm saying yes, you can dislike someone. That doesn't mean it justifies you to gossip about them. That tends to be our pattern. We don't like someone or hold a grudge against someone. Now we want to talk about that someone. We want other people to know that we dislike them for whatever reason. Yes, sir.
Ironically, sometimes we dislike people we don't even know very well.
But we haven't really conversed with them, talked with them. And sometimes it's the case that when we get to know them, they might become our best friend.
Yeah. Did you judge them by their facial features? Yeah, I get what you're saying. We got somebody brand new here. We automatically kind of make assumptions, judgments about them before we even get a chance to even know them. Yes, sir, Michael.
I think we got to be very careful about that, though, because every person has a soul. Every person. And we're taught to love our neighbor. We're taught to love our enemy. When I think about disliking someone, there's people that absolutely I would rather not interact with on a daily basis. But I think we've just got to be careful about saying dislike someone. You dislike what they do. You dislike the choices they make. You dislike the sin that they may have in their life or the actions that they're committing. But you're still supposed to love them. So I think it's a very fine line when you say dislike someone. To me, when Christ called people a brood of vipers, he was talking about what they were doing and their intent and their actions, not necessarily about them, because they had a soul as well, and he was there to save souls.
Yeah. You made the exact point of talking about. It is a very fine line. Like I say, you may dislike what's happening. Not even the fact that they sin. There may be somebody within this congregation that you just don't care to mingle with. They're your brother, they're your sister in Christ. That doesn't mean there's something going on that just says, I don't know, I don't like what they do. I don't like the things that they do. I don't like how they treat me. There's a lot of things you say I don't like. I just tell you, personal experience. I worked in the cardiac cath lab for 6 years. I left there mainly because of a group of people, and it narrowed it down to only one because everybody that was in there left except for one. And whenever I was educator before, my current director, he was manager of the cath lab and cardiac services. I'd pass by his door about every day. He and I'd talk. He tried to get me to come back to the cath lab. I said, "Nah, I'm good. I'm good where I'm at." But I would never tell him anything why I wouldn't come back until he come up, and now he's my director of all of services, and he and I are still good friends. And we're in there talking one time, and I finally confided or told him, because I know he won't carry it any further. But he and I talking, I said, well, there's one individual that is still there that I won't work with again. Because he spread some things about me. He spread things about others. He had this great big stirring stick. You know, and he stirred the pot all the time. But he made small little ripples too. Just enough to keep people edgy. You know, he would say things.
I read a book, Winning People by John Maxwell one time.
And he makes a point in that book about, I think the way he put it was, he said if Bob has a problem with everybody, Bob is probably the problem. And, you know, and I think sometimes we need to look at how much dislike we sometimes have for other people. And if you know, be real with ourselves and sometimes look intrinsically, because sometimes we may very well be the problem.
Yeah.
And as to why our dislike is at a certain level.
Yeah. Everybody that had a charge nurse or a charge role within that department always got beat up. Funny thing is, the other ones that were in this group that I've essentially left because of, 2 of them wound up being in charge. Those are gone, and he still left. So you got to think, from there up, what had happened. But that's kind of the way it went. But I told him about that. I dislike him. You know, he and I had spiritual conversations before. He was Catholic, or still is. We had spiritual conversations. We talked about the Bible. I loved him in a sense, yes, Christ loves you. I want you, converted. He and I talked about those things, but I disliked him, for the things that he did and still continues to do, as far as I know. But like I say, supporting, and think about this, supporting the concerns of others. They may have concerns. You're like, yeah, you're right. That's exactly right. You're spot on about that one. I had that incoming manager ask me about these certain people. And I tell you, when she asked me if they come with a warning label, I said, well, you interact with them for a while. I said, they may not act with you the same way they did with me. It may just be in me and her, me and him. Our interactions, our personalities. That may be all it is. If you find the same thing, we'll talk about it. But I said, but are we really, in that sense, are we supporting the concerns of others? They might find the same thing, and I could try to agree and say, yeah, I had the same issue. But it's not going to the point of, yeah, you got to watch out for that, because it will gnaw at you, and you keep talking about that person more and more. So here's something else let me tell you about. But in this same sense, when you're talking about these dainty morsels, and talking about, you just simply dislike someone. Well, look at Proverbs 23, 1-3. It says, when you sit down to eat with a ruler, observe carefully what is before you. And he puts a knife to your throat if you are given to appetite. Do not desire his delicacies, for they are deceptive food. We talked about taking those little sweet, dainty morsels and taking them down to the innermost parts. This is a feast, folks. This is talking about somebody comes in and You know something about them, you have the opportunity, and now here's opening it up. And it's deceptive food, folks. It is something that you crave to go after, but you got to resist it because you're wanting to feast on this person. Don't give in to it. Beware of those delicacies. Beware of that deceptive food. Beware of those dainty little morsels. Yes, sir.
Always got to speak it in love.
Yes, sir. Yeah, if your only intent is to bring that person another notch down, that's not loving that person. You know, if you're wanting to, correct behavior, wanting to help somebody and do that, yes. But it's still, that person needs to be involved. If we're still just talking about that person in closed circles, we're not helping that person at all because they don't realize what's going on. We talked about perceptions. I brought in an employee one time that all my nurses were scared for this. They were scared when the phone rang, knowing that this person was on the other end of the line. They knew they were going to get beat up about something. She really didn't know she was doing it. She was doing it in all respects to be professional and tell them things, but she'd tell them something was, there was an error here, but she had to go further and explain why their error was so wrong and how you should do it. And they're like, they were really tore up. So I bring her in one time, and we sat down, we talked about it, and said, do you have any idea why everybody's so angry? I said, no. I finally had to come out, and we talked about it. I finally told her, I said, it's you. She goes, what? I said, it's you. It said, perceptions, you're thinking that everything's wrong. Their perception of you, that you think everything, that you're right about everything and they're wrong about everything. But the whole turmoil, people will not come and train in your area because they don't want to work with you. She used to keep a diary of things that were done wrong. I told her the diary's got to go away. These are all the things you use to talk about other people, what they do wrong. The diary's got to go away. The things in your mind, that diary you keep in your brain has got to go away. We are the word, say God forgives and never, and forgets. We're human. We cannot forget it. It's hard. It's extremely hard. Confusion and curiosity. Why? 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 We ask the whys. I'm going to list a few things that come up in this book right here. If you got the book with you, you can turn there. It's on page 16 of this. And they just list a few of these. And I wrote a couple of it. Said, why did they divorce? They seem like the perfect couple. Why did he get fired? He was an amazing leader in the company. And we're just talking about secular stuff. But you can talk about it here. Why did somebody within the congregation? Why did they get divorced? Why did they leave the church? Or why did they leave this church? They were an important part of the group. We had those questions. What happened to their friendship? They used to be so close. Why are they here? Why haven't they been at church lately? The why. Why? Whys. What about this? We would try to fill in the blanks. We don't have the answers, so we just try to, this is what it is, It leads to, let's say, speculation. It leads to these things we just want to, well, maybe this person calls them to lead the church. Maybe the eldership wasn't what they, or they don't agree with what the elders are doing right now. Or they fell out with one of the other friends that are here with them. This whole thing, they were such good friends and now they're not anymore. Well, maybe they left for that reason. But we don't know the answer, so we start to make up stuff. Contrive stories. Pull stuff within our brains that, so this could be a logical reason for it. Of why this occurred, why this happened, why is it happening now? Why? We keep asking, the why of all that, and why is it happening now? Try to fill in the blanks. Rubbernecking. You ever going down there? I know you'd have. You got to have. I've done it myself. You're going down the interstate, you see something on the other side, and you're like, the whole 2 lanes of traffic on your side is stalled for miles, and there's nothing in front of you, but what's on the other side of the road? Everybody is stalled, wanting to go, how bad is it? What's happening over there? Somebody bad hurt? What caused that wreck? We're full of questions with no answers. And when you get past the wreck, you still don't have them. Nor will you ever have them. Somebody walks out of church today, walks out that door out there, and they're crying going out the door. You turn your head and you follow them, you watch them out. Somebody walks out of here and they got a stern look on their face and they charge right out the door. What's wrong with them? You want to fill in the blanks. You want to know what the answer is. You could go ask the person that you just saw. But we don't. We just wonder, what's going on? What happened with this person? What's happening? Somebody walks down front to this, during services today. We usually get told what their complaint is, or not their complaint, but what they're down here for, and what they're concerned about, and what's on their heart. We still don't know all the backstory. But we want to know. Oh yeah, I know why that person came down. Curiosity confusing curiosity. It only serves to satisfy curiosity. That's all it serves for. It does nothing to help or comfort. If we don't talk to that person, if we don't bring up, what we're concerned about, it doesn't help them. It doesn't bring us closer to them. It does not get us something to, work with them and talk with them about and comfort them about. And maybe, as we talked about last week, maybe even shouldering some of their burden. Carrying some of their burden with us. I would say, rather, you should be praying for them. Praying that they find an answer. Praying that they turn to God and continue to, worship God and be, consider Him for their strength. And, for them to uplift them. Yes, sir.
Something I'm about to say is going to sound strange, but I think in today's society and the point we are in the world, I think we'd all do a lot better to take a little more time focusing on ourselves. And that sounds crazy because the time we live in is, the me generation. Everybody wants to think about me. But if you think about it, when we talk about that and we say it's the me generation, that's all they don't also necessarily have to be bad things to want things, but that's kind of the bad side of things. But the focus on me in the good sense that the Bible tells us to, which is to, hey, focus on, what's in your own eye before you look at the faults of your brother. That's the part that we don't spend hardly any time on.
Yeah.
And I think when we come into this, a lot of these problems about us wanting to know things about other people and finding fault in other people come because we haven't taken enough time to look at ourselves and to constantly be evaluating ourselves and looking for opportunities to be better versions of ourselves, to tackle problems, like a lot of this stuff, you have to know yourself. Like a lot of the problems you're describing here, if you know yourself and you know this is something I struggle with and this is something that sets me off, you approach interactions with people differently. Because you know, like, okay, they're going down the road, I don't need to go there, I'm gonna find a nice way to exit this conversation. And there's just certain ways you handle things. And all of that is better for you, but it also puts you in a better position to help other people because you're a lot better put together yourself. And you're not kind of traveling down all these rabbit holes that get presented to you every day. But I think when, people just have that lack of focus on, internal development that, again, I think is biblically based, that the Bible tells you to focus on yourself and trying to improve yourself and do better, then you're a lot more apt to just, again, follow all these little, bait that's out in front of you every day to chase stuff off. And at the end of the day, you've not done anything to help anybody, and you've not helped yourself.
No. Well, and then comes that second part of that. Pray for yourself. Made a note to that says, to offer support, for me to be able to offer support for my brother or sister. But, pray for yourself that God will give you wisdom on that. Pray for yourself that you're discerning your heart, to not talk about somebody else, but rather go to your brother or sister about this. Not that they're sinning against you, but something's wrong. If you care for them enough, to at least, feel in your heart and feel, I won't say sympathy or empathy, either one, but you feel something, you feel love in your heart for them, you're got a concern that something's going on, then ask them about it. Pick up the phone, give them a call. Hey, I saw you crying today. Is there anything you want to talk about? I'm here to help you. Everybody's favorite message, to disconnect us so we don't get that, on the other side of the phone is text somebody. I did that with Miss Susie. When Mr. Martin passed away, I texted her. And she immediately called me back. She didn't even know Mr. Martin had died. That's another whole, story in and of itself. But nobody within the family, and she was very close to him, nobody told her that he was even on hospice, that he even come home sick, as he was. Nobody told her. So the first message she gets out of this is me texting her. Call somebody. Go visit them. You got concerns about somebody, if you love them enough to want to change what's happening or, again, shoulder that burden with them, go to them. But don't take the story that you get after you find out what's going on with them and share it with somebody else. Because you didn't steal something. But I'll go over what Mr. Andrew was saying at the end of our class last time about, we all know that a thief taking something is wrong. And taking it and selling it at a pawn shop or giving it to somebody else is wrong. But if you grab somebody else's thoughts and feelings about something and you go unload it on somebody else without that permission, it's wrong. Whether it's true or not, it's still wrong. You love them, go see them. Talk to them about it. That desire to be in the know. I don't know if anybody can think of the word that I'm fixing to flash up on the screen here next. What do you call somebody that just has to be in the know about everything? One word. Huh? Nosy. There's one. Not the word I'm thinking about. Aha. You cheated, though. I think you saw me put my slideshow together. It is a busybody. And that word, however how translated from Hebrew, Greek, whatever, how it's written, shows up in the Bible in multiple places. But let none of you suffer as a murderer, a thief, an evildoer, or as a busybody in other people's affairs. We put all this together in the same light as a murderer, a thief, and an evildoer. And then he goes, or as a busybody. That's pretty strong language. Pretty strong language to think that you would be in the same company with a murderer. Oh, I'm a busybody. I just going around stirring up trouble. But think about the church in this congregation, even here. If you went around meddling in everybody else's affairs, how much of a congregation would we have after that? It wouldn't be a loving congregation, I can tell you that. We'd have a faction of folks over here maybe that were grumbling about the faction of folks sitting in this section and this one, and then we might have somebody outside the door. You know, that's the way it would be. Or you wouldn't have anybody in here at all. Except for the people that all agree with one another and know one story, and then they would have something to say about one another. Something will have it. For we hear that there are some who walk among you in a disorderly manner, not working at all, but are busybodies. And besides, they are learning to be idle, wandering about from house to house, and not only idle, but also gossips and busybodies, saying things that they ought not. Oh, man. I talk too much. But we had some great discussion. We may finish up on some of this the next time we come in, but if you're looking at your book, you want to be prepared for things, the next 2 chapters that come up in here, we're going to put together, kind of smash together if we can. And, of course, we won't have class in here next Sunday. Next Sunday is the gospel meeting. So that'll be Sunday morning, as we always do, for class time, service time, and then through the week. So our next class in here will be the 26th. All right? Appreciate everything. Thank you all. And we'll meet the 26th.